Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Pete. I'm talking with a new friend, Brendan Newell, Principal Technical Architect for Microsoft. Brendan, I'm really glad you came in today, let alone are joining us to talk about, well, first of all, this encyclical, but artificial intelligence in general. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me in again.
Well, I'm very, very glad to speak with you. And we had a great time the last time. I want to ask you to reintroduce yourself to our listeners and to share with them some of your background.
Yeah, certainly. My name is Brendan Newell. I'm a principal engineer at Microsoft, working in the Metro Detroit area. My main focus is on cybersecurity, but for the past 5 years, I've been part of the Rome Call for AI Ethics, which was an initiative by the Pontifical Academy for Life to bring on board technical companies and other governmental organizations to define an ethical framework for the use of artificial intelligence. And in that particular role, I've been working with the Vatican for about 5 years now, briefing them on some activities that Microsoft has been doing, receiving feedback, and acting as a host when representatives of the Vatican came into the Microsoft headquarters.
Let's start big picture. You've been seeing where the direction of the magisterium has been going, not just because of your involvement, but just as a faithful Catholic too. With the tail end of the Francis papacy, he began commenting on a very real need for the church to speak into this issue. And then Pope Leo XIV with this new encyclical. What have been some of your thoughts?
Well, this encyclical took me by surprise. I was expecting an expanded edition of Antiqua Nova. And what we got was this beautiful treatise on the social impact of the church. And related to that was artificial intelligence. So it is really an extension of Rerum Novarum, enlightened by some of his Augustinian thought. And then he turns in and references to artificial intelligence, technology, robotics, bioethics, a number of different fields. And it's really more not an encyclical on artificial intelligence, it's an encyclical on human justice in the modern era. And that was a real eye-opener to me and a very, very pleasant surprise.
One of the things that's come out very clearly is, like you mentioned, he wasn't trying to give a technical analysis of the situation, but a pastoral treatise. Can you comment on why that was, well, frankly, the best approach he could have taken considering the circumstances?
Well, one of the things, when I was reading the document, I saw that he was trying to put society at a major inflection point. And I saw that in just about every chapter. He references the Tower of Babel and the rebuilding of the temple in Nehemiah. He'll also use Augustinian terms such as the city of the world or the city of man and the city of God. And in both, he brought that through in every single chapter. And it's really interesting to show that, okay, we are now, he's presenting in front of us this view that we are at an inflection point. What are we trying to build, not just with AI, but with technology in general? Are we trying to build a Tower of Babel based on pride and opposition to God? Or are we trying to rebuild the temple as a community, as Nehemiah did, that somehow reflects towards God? And that theme struck in every single chapter as I went through there. And that was really enlightening. It was amazing.
Now, that chapter on Nehemiah is also the portion where he starts talking about the real responsibility that needs to be had in this technocratic paradigm, which he's borrowing from Francis. But let's dial back a little bit. Let's start toward the beginning. He begins by telling us that no technological tool is by itself completely neutral. It's morally neutral, but it's not neutral because of its usage. Let's start there.
And not only just its usage, but what is it being designed for? Because the design has that human element in there, and that in and of itself is a moral act. When a artificial intelligence model is created, what is the purpose and what is its design? What is it trying to do? Is it trying to, as Pope Francis noted, trying to oppress in some way, to consolidate power, to consolidate profit? Or is it some way trying to enable people to do better, to do more? Is it fulfilling the human or is it oppressing the human? And that right there is something that I saw in there. And again, with that constant reflection in what are we trying to do with this? So the model itself, yes, every technology is neutral and ethically neutral, but not only is its use, but its design. And that's what he's challenging the major nations, the major corporations, mine included. When we provide an artificial intelligence, what is our purpose in doing that?
Mm-hmm. Now, because of that, this question of how it's designed and what its purpose is, I'm again remembering him quoting Francis about the desire to constantly dominate, which is part of the technocratic paradigm. You work in tech. Can you please speak to what's in the mind of developers for especially things like LLM and agentic AI?
Yes. I would say with the people I work with, the idea there is always a good. Mm-hmm. That, hey, this will really help someone do their job. That can be somewhat short-sighted in the sense that, okay, this makes this person more efficient, but does that reduce the joy and pleasure they get out of work? Does it reduce employment opportunities for others? And that is something that Pope Leo is challenging us to look at when he talks about solidarity. That he's talking about taking these tools and having as end goal this broad view of humanity. Not just an individual task, not just an individual role, what I do today. Yes, some things that I struggle with at work are made easier through AI. Mm-hmm. And that is a good. But what is the net effect on society? And that has to be looked at. And I think that's very intriguing that he brought Christopher Olah in to speak on that regard.
Share with our listeners who Christopher Olah is.
Christopher Olah is one of the co-founders of Anthropic. Anthropic is one of the leading, if not the leading, producers of artificial intelligence models. Mm-hmm. And by some benchmarks, they're some of the best at certain categories. So this is a very big name that he brought forward. And that was very telling in and of itself. Because he and Pope Leo is bringing out, okay, this is one of the people I've been talking about, and he's going to speak to you as well. Mm-hmm. I do really appreciate some of the impact that they've had. And Anthropic itself was not an independent choice. They worked very closely with a former Silicon Valley executive who's now a Catholic priest, Father Brendan McGuire. And Father Brendan was part of the people they brought in for Anthropic to create their moral constitution, as they call it. And they're also very heavily involved with the dicastery for education and culture under Bishop Paul Tai. Mm-hmm. So they have their own connections in the Vatican like we do. And it was clearly shown that Pope Francis brought them in for a reason, to kind of show these are what some of the people who are building the model are thinking. Kind of listen to them too. Mm-hmm. It's not just me being up here as a theologian, as a pastor. We have some technological resources available, some corporations that agree with this. Right. And that was very, very, was such a big, powerful message to those of us who work in the industry.
Considering those of you who do work in the industry, can you say that tends, so Christopher Olah's position, the position of the church, tends to be the shared sentiment for most people, especially in leadership?
It's very difficult to say. Mm-hmm. I know my own corporation and how we involve the church in ethical thought. I've seen from some of my interaction with peers how Anthropic does. I've got less insights into other organizations. Mm-hmm. They might be working with different faith communities. I don't really know. Mm-hmm. However, I think they're all looking towards that idea of doing a good, but is it a universal good?
My guest is Brendan Newell. He is Principal Technical Architect for Microsoft. We are talking about Pope Leo XIV's encyclical, Magnificat Humanitas, about essentially human relationship to artificial intelligence. We're continuing on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Witt. I'm talking with Brendan Newell, Principal Technical Architect for Microsoft. He is in the studio with us today and we are talking about Pope Leo XIV's encyclical Magnificat Humanitas. So, Brendan, lest anyone think that the church is, you've heard the phrases, trying to go back to the quote-unquote dark ages, or the Pope's being a Luddite, or lest anyone think that he is erring on the other extreme, that he's being so technocratic that he's ceasing to be the vicar of Christ. Anyone who's read the document, he actually addresses those pitfalls.
Oh, most certainly. You go through paragraph after paragraph talking about the benefits of artificial intelligence, and they are real. There's great medical research being done with those. There's great increase in productivity, help for people who are neurodiverse or physical handicaps. There's fantastic work out there, and the church has recognized that. I've seen that just like working directly in the Vatican. They have had a strong interest in what we are doing, and it's been very, very welcoming. The church has never stood in the way of advancement. Now, one of the key factors, though, is technology advancement. Advancement is an objective term. It's meaning it's moving towards some goal. Now, in the church's terms, that's always, well, our teleological and salvation. But in human terms, it's the dignity and support of the human person. Any technology that supports that is, by definition, a technological advancement, and the church wholeheartedly supports. I have never heard anyone in the church suggesting we go back to men with shovels versus excavators and bulldozers. We see that removal of human drudgery, and the Pope addresses that. Technology advancement is good if it frees up humans from the drudgery and allows them to be more human.
The key here is exactly that, to allow them to be more human. And so he then phrases the question from the other extreme. Is this technology worthy of being called allowing humans to be more human?
No, that's exactly it. And that's that inflection point that we're at right now. And a lot of that has to do with design, as I had mentioned, with corporations such as myself. When we release something, is this designed to do good? Not just for a specific task, but for humanity in general. Then there's always the use of it by the end user. And he'll talk not only about solidarity, that end goal, but subsidiarity, how this must be properly used at multiple different levels. It directs to nation states. He addresses to the large corporations. He addresses to educators, to families. And how do we use this in a moral way? He's not saying that no, families should not use this, but our educators should avoid this. In fact, quite the opposite. How to use it responsibly.
He also shies away from being an alarmist, like you've rightly already noted. So he doesn't address the Skynet question, if you'll pardon a particular Schwarzenegger a pun here. So speak about that,
well,
please.
I think that he's probably looking at it that those types of scenarios are at heart unrealistic. He has very brilliant people. Some of the priests that I work with have doctorates in engineering on the Vatican side. So they understand what artificial intelligence is. I've given several presentations at parishes on that, demystifying artificial intelligence. So he gets that understanding that there's not a sentient entity that can come alive. In fact, just the opposite. It's not human. It's not truly intelligent. He'll use that term in quotes because it's only a simulation of intelligence. What he is focusing us towards is that human element itself. Our decisions, how we use it personally, both as a society, as parents, as children, as educators, how do we use that technology so it does not negatively impact society? Because it's really up to us.
And that's precisely why we can also, therefore, see how he keeps calling for the development of prudence and virtue from especially the perspective of parents raising children to navigate the technology.
Oh, in fact, he even recognizes something one of my peers. I give presentations at parishes, and I work with Darren O'Brien, who's a psychologist. He talks about something that Pope Leo talks about in the encyclical, the effect of screen time on how that impairs a child. the lack of true social interaction. It becomes a simulacrum of a relationship, not a true one. Then along with things like a general distrust that AI is introducing. Because we see something, oh, that's generated by AI. Oh, that's generated by AI. We get thrown at it so much that something that is true and representative becomes distrusted right off of the bat because it might be AI generated. Mm-hmm. And that in of itself is having a negative effect on society.
The negative effect can also be expanded to how it's impacting the way reasoning is being impaired, basic intellectual muscles that need to be developed and children need to be trained into. So the Pope's not unaware of this.
Oh, no. Just he mentions that in the section on education, mm-hmm. that educators must be vigilant to ensure that a child is questioning, because answers can come so easily mm-hmm. through an artificial intelligence. It does not bring about the methodology of thought that is necessary to frame an argument, to actually research into a subject, as opposed to typing it in or speaking it into your smartphone and getting the results back. He challenges educators to be aware that this technology changes quickly. So last year's curriculum would not apply, but they need to be aware that the purpose is to educate the child, not for them to be able to spout off knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly why he's cautioning, as like we mentioned, especially parents. So time and time again, as you read this document, it becomes clear parents have the primary role here in the stewarding of their children's formation.
Oh, definitely. That's where that subsidiarity comes from. There's guardrails should be at place at every level: nations, corporations, families, educators, parish. That's the conference we're going to be at mm-hmm. with the Archdiocese in just a little while. Mm-hmm. How to enlighten parish ministry in this. So those pieces have to be in place, and there's a responsibility at every level. That's subsidiarity means address the problem at the lowest level where it's applicable. My children, I will address there, make sure that the appropriate controls are in place, and at the parish level, and keep moving on up, mm-hmm. and making sure that we use AI in a beneficial way, and we avoid circumstances where it's not beneficial.
Yep. One of the things that, like you mentioned, the entire section on education becomes very clear is in this language of what's beneficial and what's not. The entire sphere of academia is changed forever, and we need to acknowledge that. But he provides us guardrails. He provides us the grounding to be able to move forward. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, he encourages us to establish the ground rules. Now, he himself does not do so. Mm-hmm. That is a responsibility at different levels. But to evaluate and look at them, in fact, one of the quotes I had, educating people about the use of AI involves teaching them to decide when and for what purpose it ought not to be used. Mm-hmm. And he has a fantastic quote in there, digital sobriety. Stepping back from the digital world. Those are some of the pieces that we have to be aware of as persons individually, as caretakers for family, parish life, schools, and all of that. Just to understand when AI ought not to be used.
What's really important about this, too, is to branch not just away from the education question, but to the human question at large. What he alludes to it a little bit, but we can definitely address this. The transhumanist question, which dominates the technocratic sphere today.
Yes, and that concept is making humans better than they are themselves. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, God did that job well.
Well, that's a beautiful place to end, Brendan. The time always flies when I'm talking with you. My guest has been Brendan Newell. He works as Principal Technical Architect for Microsoft. We've been talking about, from a technical professional's expertise and experience and perspective, Pope Leo XIV's Magnificat Humanitas. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.